Okay, hello everybody. Jessie Lucas here for another episode of Conscious Body Conversations. And I have a special guest with us today, intuitive animal communicator, Elizabeth Wallace. Now, I got to know Elizabeth over the past maybe half a year or so. And one of the things, as I think about embodiment, as I think about how we as humans, these human males on this planet, can really live our fullest, like in everything that our bodies, our sensory environment, our emotions, our energy, everything that we have to offer. How can we learn to be better human animals? And my conversations with Elizabeth have been really cool because as an intuitive animal communicator, she looks through a different lens. She has access to these animal bodies and their essence and their energies and how they can teach us as humans to live more harmoniously with ourselves and on this planet. So I'm going to save all of that good juiciness for Elizabeth. So I ask you today to really kind of expand your perspective of embodiment to include not only your body, but the bodies we share this planet with, the other inhabitants we have here, because I do think there's a lot to learn. I'm excited to learn today. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for showing up today with your experience and your wisdom. And I would love to hear from you. First of all, tell us a little bit about your story, who you are, and then how can these animals help us in our own embodiment process?
Sure. So thank you so much, Jessie, for inviting me. I love to talk about animals and all the fun things that they tell me and talk about with me. So I am an intuitive animal communicator. And basically what that means is that I, yes, literally have conversations with animals. I get information from them. I connect in with their energy intuitively, and I can have conversations with them. I might get images that they'll show me, or sometimes I just sort of get these what are known as spiritual downloads. So I'll just get this block of information sort of put in my brain, and I know something that the animal wants me to know. So one of the things, and I love that you asked me to be a part of this, because one of the things that's so cool about animals is that they really provide this beautiful example to us humans about how to experience this world in a physical body. They live in harmony with nature. They live in harmony with each other. They don't care about yesterday. They're not worried about tomorrow. They really don't care about what color fur their litter mates have or their companions out in the wild have. They don't care about who's bigger, who's smaller, who's thin, who's heavier, what body structure somebody has. They really just coexist beautifully. And I'm always so taken aback when I watch animals interact with each other in nature. Number one, at how they get along with one another, even interspecies, right? And number two, just how beautifully they share the land and share the earth together. Now, yes, there's, they have to survive, and there's a survival of the food chain and all of that. But outside of that, like if they're not looking for food or for a meal, they really just give us this incredible example of how do we be in the world. And so one of the things that really dovetails with this beautifully is, obviously I've had a lot of conversations with animals over the years. I've always known that I could talk to animals, but it's really just recently in the last couple of years that I've been brave enough to step into my power and own this and say to the world, yes, I really do talk to animals, and stopped worrying about whether people were going to think I was crazy or whether it was real or not. And so one of the beautiful things that they've really taught me about are these things called soul contracts. And so a soul contract is basically an agreement that we make with as we make these agreements when we're in spirit. So even before we incarnate into these bodies, we make these agreements, and they can be with really any other spirit or soul. It doesn't have to be another human. We do make them with other humans, but we also make them with animals. And generally speaking, the agreement goes something like, I am going to incarnate as a human, and I am going to provide you with shelter and a safe place to live. And you are going to provide me with a life lesson, or you are going to provide me with some nugget of information that I need. So in the time that we share a physical space together, you're going to help me on my path. And generally speaking, they're very deep spiritual lessons that our animals are here to teach us. So I will give you a perfect example of this. I have a dog. Her name is Charlotte, and she is a handful. And she is not like any golden retriever I've ever had. And it's a very long story that is for another day, but I was not supposed to end up with her. I was supposed to have a different golden retriever. So there's no mistake that the universe lined things up for her to end up with me. And when I got her, she's no matter all the training that I did with her, all the right, correct things that I did with her, she was like this, like she was just so bold and just unruly. She wouldn't listen to anything that I said. Charlotte wakes up every morning and says, how is the universe going to surprise and delight me today? And just goes after what she wants. And she wouldn't listen to me. And she would pull on the leash, and she'd always be trying to pull me in an opposite direction. And she's barking all the time. And well, it's again, another long story. But the soul contract that Charlotte and I had is that she was going to come into my life when I was ready to step into my power and talk about animal communication and spread it out into the world. So as I've done this, Charlotte's unwanted behavior, or what I would consider unwanted behavior, has gone like this.
Wow.
And when I start slipping back into old patterns of like, I'm not good enough, or the world isn't going to receive me, or what am I thinking? People are going to think I'm crazy. Charlotte's unwanted behavior starts to go back up like this. So what's really been beautiful about this is Charlotte is this incredible example, and she's sort of like guiding me, right? She's like nudging me every time I fall out of my power. She's this amazing example for me. Like, you need to be in the present moment. That stuff about not being good enough, or that stuff about this isn't going to be well received, is past stuff or future stuff. And we're here in the present. And she gives me this incredible example every day about living life in the present moment. And she lives it with such joy and such gusto. I mean, this dog loves life, such gusto. But most people don't think of behaviors. Most people would look at that and go, that's really those are unwanted behaviors, right? Which they can be. But if we look at it like, what is the animal trying to show us? Or what are they trying to teach us? Or what are they trying to guide us towards? We can shift how we're looking at that. And it's almost always, well, no, it always is to come back to our center and to our heart. And I always think with animals, they're so present in their body, right? And I always am amazed when I connect in with Charlotte. It's the first message is breathe and come back into yourself. And I just think it's such a beautiful way to live, and such a beautiful example that they provide for us.
Oh, okay. You just dropped so many gems right there. And I have some ahas that I want to share, and I have some questions to turn back to you. And
Sure.
I will say this. I am not like the most animal connected person in the world. And this is so fascinating to me. I'm not saying, I don't like animals. I'm just not one of those like, oh, I want to eat up all the animals. Not eat, like I actually am a vegetarian, but like, like eat them up and hug them kind of thing. So, but you just spoke to me in a way of someone who's not necessarily like, connects right in with animals. in a way that I could really, really get it. A few of the things that really just stood out to me, that sense of full presence,
Mhm.
no filter, no, from because I work mostly or primarily or solely with human bodies, this prefrontal cortex that we have
Mhm.
that does so much interpretation and storytelling about the past,
Mhm.
storytelling about the future, and not that that's something wrong we do as humans. It's one of our gifts, but it's certainly something that gets us tangled a
Mm.
lot. It pulls us out, if from my perspective, if I'm looking at, let's have all the conversations we can about embodiment, then we have to look at what is disembodiment, disconnection. And when you were describing this pure presence, this, and what you were just describing, that breathe and come back to your heart,
Mhm.
I think as humans, if we could all learn to do that with greater ease,
Mm.
that to me, I've described embodiment in a lot of different ways, but you just described that in a very, very pure and simple way, and kind of pulling from these animals who don't have the same prefrontal cortex that we do. And
Mhm.
so they are just, without being pulled in one direction or the other, by default, I would assume, and I'm not an animal expert, living more just naturally in that embodied state. And like you said, more in harmony with nature, more in harmony with just, I would think, the what's going on with, the weather, the planet, and with the beings around them. And so it would only make sense, when that animal's around a human, it would bounce off of
Mhm.
what's going on with you. So that's really fascinating there. What I want to ask you about is teasing into this concept of soul contracts a little bit. And certainly how the animals come into play. So when I think about embodiment and the work that I do using movement to kind of retrain some of the things that have gone haywire, some of the things that have gotten tangly, whether that's tingly muscles and scar tissue, or emotional scarring, or our nervous systems being stuck in survival mode, those kinds of things. I deal a lot with these experiences that continue to live on when we go through something that might have been difficult or hasn't gone the way we thought it would, or even down to the level of real trauma. And oftentimes I come to this place when we can kind of go in through the embodied movement method that I go through, this place of really, on a, in my world, kinesthetic level, resolving whatever that is stored somatically in the body. And what I just heard was you describe another way to look at that as a soul contract, like these things that we experience have, there's a lesson in there. I call them pearls of wisdom, right?
Right.
There are these things that we can derive, that our experiences have something to deliver to us. So can you just open up that pocket a little bit more on the soul contracts, and through your lens of how animals help us out there?
Sure. So one of the things that I think we as humans try to do, right, is when we have these, like, and I'll talk about like a traumatic experience, or I'll talk about grief. I help people work through grief a lot when they've lost an animal, because I can still connect with animals in spirit. And what I find is that our society has taught us that like we're supposed to shut down. Let's not deal with that. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's push that to the side. Let's not look at that. And you might find when you're going through a really difficult time that you have an animal that comes into your life, right? Well, that animal has a contract with you to help you through that particular period of time. And it's no surprise to me, Charlotte came to me a couple of months before my mother passed away, right? And here's this dog that is just like so out, like just so larger than life. And I was really very shut down after that. And she was like, the contract was, no, I'm not going to let you retreat. Like, that's really Charlotte's contract. Like, I'm not going to let you retreat into yourself. And I think what happens is when we get these animals that are here helping us, right, that those experiences that get trapped in our bodies in ways, it's almost like they don't let us shut down and trap it there. Because when you have an animal, when you're sharing your life with an animal, it's almost impossible not to fall in love with them immediately, right? And they need you to care for them. They need you for their food. If you have a dog, they need you to take you out for walks, or take them for walks. And it's like that piece of your heart that might be walled off or shut down. There's a piece that stays open. And even if it only stays open to that animal, like that could be part of the soul contract, is like, I'm not going to let you shut down completely. Like, I'm going to keep that glimmer of hope open, that your heart will be able to love again and to feel again, or know that it's safe again to be out in the world. Like, whatever, people experience all different things, and you know better than I do, that gets trapped in their body. So that would, I don't know if that completely answers the question you asked.
Yes, that makes so much sense. I think a lot about when we are healing traumas, when we're moving difficult things through. I was just having a conversation with somebody else, kind of describing it like, okay, well, if you've had a physical injury or surgery, and then you have scar tissue from that, days, weeks, months, even years after that injury or surgery, you may still have pain in that area because that scar tissue is kind of pulling. You may still have inflammation that's causing pain, right? So these more emotional experiences, they can have the same effect. There's an emotional scar tissue that happens that still pulls, that still is inflamed, that still can make us want to retreat. And I know that unless you have that hook into something alive, something with that life sparkle to it, that's when we are at risk for, retreating, sinking under, head underwater. And I know I've been in that place. I'm sure, many people listening are like, "Nah," I'm like, yep, I've been in that place when things were too painful. I didn't have that thing to hook into, and I sunk.
Right.
So, and I think one of the biggest embodiment lessons of this next era in healthcare and in wellness and in the healing arts is that it is not something we do alone. That
Right.
this whole, we are coming off this generation of driving, self-care, self-care, self-care,
Mhm.
self-care, and holy cannoli, yes to all of the self-care, but I do not believe it ends there. I believe that, especially with the level of stress and strain and pain and trauma that we all have stored in our bodies that we are dealing with on a daily basis, not to mention everything compounded from however many years we have been alive on this planet, and who knows what's bigger than, be bigger and beyond that. I don't think we are meant to hang on to that hook all by ourselves. And what you are describing is a way that through these soul contracts, these animals that have this maybe lighter way of being on this planet, because of their pure connection there, because of their ability to just fully live embodied, that they can help us. They can be that hook into us. I know sometimes, like, it's a therapist or a community or a support network or a wellness practice, or I mean, we can hook into other things, but how easy is that when you just have this guide in a furry package,
Right.
to do that? And it makes me think, you mentioned Charlotte coming into your life after your mother's passing. As we're recording this, we are coming up on the anniversary of my father's passing. And he was a guy, one of the legacy lessons I've taken was to live alive until you are not alive anymore. And as his body was deteriorating, as his health was deteriorating, he had a cat that the more his physical body's health sank, the closer that cat stayed to his body. And I mean, they had a cute little bond, when my dad was well, but the more my dad's health failed, the more this cat would not leave his side. And, I would get on FaceTime with him or get on the phone with him, and there the cat was. And it was almost like my dad didn't even have time to talk to me, because he was like, so like, I got to take care of Tyler. I got to do this. And it kept him, and, my dad did have time to talk to me, but it kept, I could see, and my dad had so many other great things to like keep that spark going until it turned off. But hearing your story, I can see exactly that connection between the two of them, and how that was absolutely a thread that kept my dad's aliveness there, and until it just wasn't anymore. This is just all so beautiful. And I know there's so much richness and so much depth to all of this. And especially too, I know from, people who have lost pets that are near and dear to them, how much that can cause so much emotional scarring and an emotional heaviness and pain. So without taking the whole conversation down that path, I just want to note, anybody who's watching or listening, if that kind of really stood out to you as something you might want to deal with, Elizabeth is going to share her contact information at the end. So there will be an opportunity to follow up and learn more if that is something you need some personal guidance for. But Elizabeth, before we do wrap here, would you kind of like bring this around to us? I love these themes of living in harmony, having these animals as teachers through these soul contracts, to be more embodied ourselves, to learn more how to live in that pure presence, and whatever that lesson is, like you said for you, Charlotte, like it's breathe, like bring it home with us for something practical that we can kind of take away with to wrap this up today.
So I want to delve a little bit more into what you just talked about, because as you were talking about, we're not meant to do this alone, I was getting guidance from one of my spirit animals, who is an elephant. And she was showing me an image of how elephants all live in community, and they circle around each other, and they take care of each other, and they protect each other. And what she said, humans have to relearn that you're meant to live in community. And I just thought what you were saying was so beautiful, because, and it just dovetails so beautifully with what the animals show me and tell me every day, because we've never been more technologically connected, right? And yet we're more isolated. Our loneliness, I think, is the real pandemic that our as a humanity we face. Our rates of depression are higher, our rates of suicide, our rates of addiction are higher. This is because we're disconnected from each other. And I think really what we can learn from the animals is to come together in community. They don't like to be out on their own in the wild. Even domesticated animals generally like to be with their humans or with other animals. Number one, it's not safe for them to be out in the wild by themselves. So they like to travel in packs or herds or whatever they call themselves, according to the species. But I think it's really a beautiful example that they provide, that not only just about being present in our bodies and living in the present moment, but doing so in community and with each other and sharing that, because that's where the real joy is.
I love that. I thank you so much for sharing that. And it really, I think if there's a takeaway here, especially, if you're watching this and close to when we're recording it, we're entering the second half of 2021, where we've been in this time of, it's not safe to be together, right? That's the experience we have had this past year and a half. And I think what it's really shown us is, were we together before that? Were these structures, in our cultures really giving us the opportunities to connect? And it makes me think, when I did my graduate work about a decade ago, which was kind of the seeds of the embodiment work that I do now, kind of pulling from, okay, working very mechanically with bodies, you know, teaching yoga and personal training, and then really having this experience of deep healing in a time when I was very alone. And I entered this study of an embodiment, and the theme of that, my school always had themes for the residencies that we did, and the quote was that the community is actually the smallest unit of health. We think about, you know, what's the smallest unit of health? Is it your cells or your mitochondria, or your DNA, or, you know, what, you know, is an atom, what, you know, what is it? And I loved that perspective that the community is really the smallest unit of health, because we might have all of these other micro understandings of like what's working, what's not, as far, you know, I'm drinking my brain nootropics right now, like all of that is so important. But this ability to feel safer, this ability to feel more at ease when there is a togetherness, when there's community, I think that is a perfect note to bring this home on. So thank your elephant for that. I love elephants. They are just so majestic. And anytime, I mean, you know, I don't want to get to a debate on zoos, but anytime I go to a zoo and I stand in front of the elephants, like, I just am dumbfounded. So thank your elephant for that. Thank you so much for being here. Where can we find you?
So you can find me at elizabethwallace.com. And if somebody is interested in learning more about animal communication, there's lots of information there. And there is a link where you could schedule a complimentary call. And I'm happy to jump on a call and talk to you about how I could help.
Awesome. I highly recommend, if there was something moving for you here, to reach out to Elizabeth. I can speak to her integrity and wisdom from my heart. And if the work of moving this all through your body, through your learning how to physically be in your body in ways of greater ease sounds good to you, you can find out more about my work at embodiedmovementtraining.com. Thank you, Elizabeth, so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and please tune into the next episode. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.